She's a motivator, millionaire mentor, Jesus lover, serial entrepreneur, mother, and former Wall Street attorney who comes with her own personal trigger warning. On a mission to teach you how to empower yourself and heal your life from the inside out. And now, welcome to Deep Throat, and by that I mean throat chakra, with Liana Shanti.
Aloha, everyone. This is your host, Liana. Welcome to episode 4 of Deep Throat, and by that I mean throat chakra. I am extremely excited today to be sharing this particular topic with you, and I've been mostly in tears of gratitude for the entirety of today because I have been receiving a massive outpouring of messages, all of which at some point will be on my website. A lot of them are already on my Instagram stories and in highlights, but messages from so many of you who are stepping up into your voice and becoming empowered and sharing with me the things you're empowered about in terms of abuse in your life and narcissists in your life and family cults and child abuse, sexual abuse. So many things that you are speaking out against. And many of you have also shared that you are in the process of doing your own podcasts and your own blogs and your own websites and programs. And so many people I didn't even know were in my community because, of course, my community is at this point over 150,000 people, which is growing and has grown exponentially this year, particularly in the last few months. And, you know, people are just coming forward with these stories of how my teachings have activated their sovereignty and their trust in themselves and their own personal connection to Jesus, which that is my life purpose, to show you a path to connect with Jesus from within, because no one can do that for you. And it's just such a magnificent day today because it happened to be the day that I was planning to do the podcast on this topic. And people started messaging me from what I had written in my stories. So there are so many things I want to share with you. And, you know, as I said in episode 1, Deep Throat is a platform to showcase what healing your life really looks like. And I promised you that I would be inviting some of the most amazing empowered women. We had that in episode 3 with Lisa. And we had so many women in episode 2 called Voices, and I still have a ton of those amazing recordings to put together for future podcasts. Our next podcast, we're going to be talking about family cults, particularly in marginalized communities. I have some amazing women that are going to be joining us for that one. And, you know, but as I said, throat chakra is the hub of the human design chart. It's where everything manifests from. And this podcast is about going deep. So without further ado, today's podcast, I want to talk about surrender first and foremost, because surrendering your life to Jesus it's the most blissful, beautiful path you can have, the most beautiful, blissful experience of life that any of us can have. And what I love about full surrender is not only is it required to have true sovereignty, we're going to be talking about sovereignty as well, but it's so comforting and it's strengthening and it's awakening all at the same time. And most important, it is experiential. Because as I've been teaching for a decade, you know, there are a million religions out there. There are a million teachers. I mean, obviously more than a million. There are so many different things that anyone can believe at any given time. But at the end of the day, it has to be experienced. It has to be your lived experience. And I've constantly shared this with my students. I've written about it, talk about it all the time. You can't take anyone's word for anything, including mine. I emphasize that a lot because ultimately Jesus will give you the experience. He will give you the experience. You will live and breathe the experience. You just have to know how to get there. You have to know the path. You have to have a trail guide unless you were born sovereign, unless you were born with parents who unconditionally loved you and initiated and empowered you after they protected and nurtured you. Then you probably are already intimately connected with Jesus, and you've already had a lifetime of experience, of life proof, what I'm always calling life proof. And I know I certainly have had a lifetime of life proof, and my family has as well, and many of my close friends and people who have been in my communities, and they talk about their experience. And one of the most important things to carry forward with you in your entire life is that your lived experience is 100% valid. Do not ever let anybody tell you that it's not valid, because only you move through this life in your own shoes. Only you move through this life and die in this life with your own experiences. No one else can live for you. No one else can be you and occupy the space that you occupy, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So before even going further into this topic of surrender and sovereignty, we have so much to talk about today, but it is all about what you experience, and you have to really acknowledge that and look at your life and look at your internal state, look at your state of peace, your state of calm, your state of connection to the world. And how are you feeling on that journey, your lived experience? So, never did I have any idea that Jesus would be leading me in the direction that I'm in now. This year has been spectacular. I never thought, however, that I would be delving so deep into the topics of child abuse, sexual abuse, family cults. I knew, of course, because I created my narcissistic healing program years ago, and it's been, purchased and downloaded by thousands and thousands of people all around the world and to this day. But I didn't know it was going to go beyond that. Every morning I pray for Jesus to use me, use my voice. I say, Jesus, my life is yours. I'm here for you. I will do whatever you ask, wherever you ask me to do it, and however you ask me to do it. And sometimes it's exciting and fun, and sometimes it's scary, and it's massive and much bigger than I could have ever imagined for my own self. And I guarantee you that once you start praying that same prayer every morning, asking him to use you, use your voice, use your life, use your gifts for his good, he will. But it requires total surrender. So, for me, often what I plan out works flawlessly, but sometimes he leads me down a road where I'm asked to step up even further into my power, to be a voice for the voiceless, and to help empower and awaken the voices of others who haven't had a voice. And he's certainly given me a lot of practice with the wide range of people that I've been an activist for, from the many Tibetan monks and nuns I gained political asylum for as an attorney, to the voiceless kid in my music class who was afraid to sing out loud, and I stood up for him against this huge, mean, nasty music teacher, to the children being physically abused in the middle of a department store, and for all animals, and of course, now for my students. But the beauty now is that Jesus has led me right here to this place in this time, not to be the voice of my students like I was for those other people or for animals, but to be a voice to empower you to use your own voice, to empower you to see what sovereignty looks like so you can claim it for yourself, to lead by example of what surrender looks like and what truly awakened divine feminine power looks like. A power that terrifies the patriarchy, a power that terrifies the controllers and the manipulators and the authoritarian parents. They can't handle this true power. And my role now, Jesus has led me right to this exact point in time, and he has been expanding my reach and my audience of people, you, who are becoming empowered your own self, using your own voice to say whatever you want, however you want, in whatever format you want, without any fear. And it is absolutely beyond my wildest dreams how this year Jesus has expanded my community so exponentially, and how the birth of this actual podcast that we're on right now emerged naturally from how he was leading me, which is now a platform for many voices. And it's been downloaded, I think, a total of 7,000 times so far, which is a lot. If you do any research on brand new podcasts of people with relatively small, 150,000 people is relatively small in the world of billions of people, but it's a very high download rate of people that are listening to this. And it is growing, and it's only growing. And he's shown me that it's going to grow exponentially as well. But the voices, this platform being for the voices that have been silenced by their family cults, silenced by their religious cults, silenced by brainwashing, mind control, manipulation, that have kept you disempowered and afraid. And now, today, the divine feminine is truly rising. We hear a lot about that in the metaphysical, the new age, airy-fairy bullshit dogma out there. Oh, feminine rising, rising women. No, women haven't been rising when they're not speaking out against abuse. Women haven't been rising when they're staying married to men who abuse their children. Women have not been rising when they allow their husbands to hit them, yell at them, abuse them. Now, women are rising. The divine feminine is rising, and not only in women, in men too. I have seen a massive uptick in male students in the last 2 months. It's been pretty phenomenal. I was talking to my husband about this over the weekend, and buying the programs, downloading the programs, messaging me saying, wow, I'm seeing how I was disempowered as a child, how my own awareness and understanding of the divine feminine was repressed. And I'm a disempowered male because of this. And so really something spectacular has been started by Jesus a long time ago, but this year in particular. And when, back in the spring, it became so clear to me, and Jesus led me directly to be very vocal, very active, very prolific in my writing and teaching about true sovereignty, what it looks like, what surrender looks like, and most importantly, to teach how people have become so disempowered and what actually happens in family cults, what actually happens by manipulation and control, what actually happens to get you to that place in adulthood where you are completely disempowered. Because being truly sovereign is incredibly rare. I recently asked a few days ago on my Instagram, I said, anyone, send me the name or number or email of a single person who holds themselves out as a teacher, who is actually sovereign and not programmed, actually sovereign, actually critically thinking, actually fully sovereign, which of course means they'd have to be completely, fully surrendered to Jesus, because you can't be surrendered and sovereign at the same time. Sovereign does not mean sovereign to being a slave to your ego. But I asked for that. One who's actually sovereign and not programmed. I did not get one single name. And, I shared that in that message, if they eat animals, don't bother sending me their name. Cultural cult programming in an extreme level. They follow a religion that their family followed, don't bother sending me that name. Complete cultural cult programming. Think about all the cults you believe in or that you once did. And while we're on that topic, let's talk about eating animals. It's a topic that freaks a lot of people out. It's a topic that a lot of people don't even want to listen to or hear about. But think about this from a mind control perspective. You eat animals not because you chose that. You did not ever choose as a child to take the life of an innocent being and murder it for your lunch. You would have never. You were born with compassion. We all are. You were born with empathy. It has actually been psychologically proven that the only children who actually abuse animals and who believe animal abuse is okay are actually clinically diagnosed psychopaths and sociopaths who lack empathy. So if you didn't choose to do that, who chose it for you? The obvious answer, the family you grew up in. That is a programmed mind control belief. Anything, and I mean anything, that you have not unpacked from your brain, examined and looked at. Anything you say, I believe in this, I believe in that. Anything that you have not unpacked in your brain is a part of mind control. And who better than your family? They've had control over you since you were born. So you did not choose to eat animals. Even people today who are 40 and I choose it now. I know that there's animal cruelty, but I choose it. They're still not choosing that because they're not murdering the animals. Now, there are some people that are hunters and they're going out and hunting food and they have numbed out to that and they justify that. And if you're a hunter and you are shooting and killing your own animals and eating your own animals, you are absolutely one step above the average mind control person, but you're still mind controlled because you grew up hunting. You grew up in a family that hunted, so that became normalized for you. And what you have to understand about mind control in order for you to reclaim your sovereignty, it's your sovereignty, it's not anybody else's. In order for you to live as a sovereign being, you have to unpack all of the beliefs that were pre-programmed. It's like getting a computer that is full of software and full of viruses and full of all kinds of programs. You have to do a complete purge of that computer. Because how do you know what's authentically you, what is true to your soul? No one knows that but you and God. You have to unpack that. So if you show me a person who eats animals, they are programmed, they are mind controlled. Because it is not in human nature to choose to take the life of an innocent being and murder it for lunch when you can have many other foods and be nourished. So, yes, every single person consuming animals is participating in a cult. They don't know it. But if you show people an Instagram page like Elwood's Organic Dog, it's ELWOODS, Organic Dog, one continuous word, on Instagram, take a look at that page. Show somebody else that page. It is a sarcastic satire page that is all about dog meat, dog ears being given to pigs while a person is hugging a pig, and dog meat being used for food, for dinner, for, humans. And the level of outrage that I've seen on that page from people who don't realize it's satire. They are just absolutely insane with rage. And many of them are eating cows and they don't see the absurdity, the hypocrisy in their rage. But there's also vegans who are very angry. They don't understand that it's satire. But check it out and note your reaction to it. That gives you a barometer to the level of programming. And that's just one topic. That's just one topic. I think eating animals was such a great intro for me to talk about with this particular podcast because it's a hot button issue and everybody eats multiple times a day. And you have such entrenched, programmed mind control beliefs about what you're eating. And when you go to countries like Korea, where they eat dog and they have dog meat markets, they think nothing of it. You go to India and cows are sacred. They think it's crazy to eat a cow. And you start to unpack the programming and the mind control. And that's why I said, show me somebody who's truly sovereign. Nobody came up with anything. And you're probably not going to. Maybe you just haven't found them yet. Because very few people have actually deprogrammed themselves and then looked at everything possible to look at. I remember one time I was in law school and one of my professors, we were talking about politics and, he had made assumptions about my political beliefs based on different conversations throughout the year. And at one point we were talking about death penalty, which I am completely against because we're not God. It's not our right to take the life of anybody. And just like, euthanasia of dogs, assisted suicide of humans, all of it, right? It's taking a life, it's playing God. It's the penultimate egoic act to take a life. And when people end the life of a family member or they end the life of an animal because they're, quote, being compassionate, no, they're not being compassionate. They say that. They say, oh, I don't want that animal to suffer. But what you really don't want is for you to suffer. That's what you really don't want. You want to remove and cleanse the suffering from your view, from your life. Meanwhile, we have no idea why God, why the divine has a being suffering. It's not our choice. And if you're witnessing the suffering, that's for you to witness. It's not for you to step in and decide that you don't want to see it. That's pure ego. That is the ego deciding life or death. That's just not the domain of human beings. That's the domain of a massive ego. So I'm in this class, and this professor is giving this discussion, the ethical discussion of death penalty. But of course, being that it was law school, the conversation centered around the fact of, should we make laws based on ethics? And of course, we concluded, which was the whole point of the lecture, that all laws basically are the codification of some ethics somewhere. And, that's something that really can't be avoided. But what was so fascinating was his assumption that because we had previously had a conversation about abortion, which again, of course, I'm not in favor of that. I'm very against the death of children. And, he was shocked that I was also against the death penalty. And he said that's inconsistent. I said, inconsistent with what? And he said, inconsistent with a political ideology. And I said, but I don't have a political ideology. I have a God ideology. I have a Jesus ideology. And Jesus does not condone the murder of people, whether it's a criminal in a jail cell or a baby in a womb. That's consistency at the max, but he had made an assumption that because of the conversation about abortion, I guess he made some kind of assumption of my political leanings, and then, just believed that everything that would fall under that umbrella would be something I would believe. And I said to him, you don't know me yet. You will. It was pretty early on in the semester. I said, but I'm a free thinker. I'm a critical thinker. I'm sovereign. I was saying this way back in the day. I'm like, I'm not following anybody's prescription for anything if I haven't run it through my own sovereign mind. And of course, that's what I teach my students. And I'm constantly saying, you need to look at this. You need to look within at your values, at your soul, at your higher self. What do you feel is right for you? And, this comes up in the weirdest of ways. It came up in my early days when I first started my Facebook page and was talking about veganism. And one of the topics that came up was honey. And I had a lot of very aggressive, angry vegans who were like, wait a minute, you've been a vegan for, 20 something years. I mean, at this point it's been over 30, but this was when I first started. And they're like, and you eat honey? I'm like, yes, I do. And they're like, well, that's not vegan. I'm like, no, that is vegan. I don't need to accept your definition, because to me, it is vital to support dying bee colonies, to support local small farmers who cultivate bee colonies. Bee colonies are dwindling. They are essential to our food sources. And the people who care and manage bee populations are vital to the earth. And when I support local small farmers with my money, with my purchases, and they use ethical, sustainable practices, and they're not harming the bees in any way, they are contributing to animal welfare. And there's nothing more vegan than that. Whereas other people have a definition that includes no honey, but includes palm oil. And I've said many times, extensive research that I've done into the palm oil issue and the massive deaths of orangutans for the clearing of the trees in order to harvest the palm oil. And it's not sustainable. And not only is it destroying the orangutan populations, but it's also displacing indigenous people. So from a perspective of the human that I am, the human that I choose to be, the human that I think meticulously, of what I do and what my actions are, that honey for me is 100% in alignment. Maybe it's not for you. That's great. That's fine. That's your choice. But have you really thought it through? And the reality is most people don't. Most people accept. They just accept a wholesale belief and they do that. So if they're, picking a belief, they're picking veganism, they just do that. And they don't look at the bigger issues. And it's like that with politics. People cling to a party and that they take everything wholesale instead of saying, no, there's a lot of stuff in here that doesn't make any sense to me because it doesn't align with who I truly am. And that is the core of everything I teach. It is this sovereignty that you can only get when you're fully surrendered to Jesus. And the reason for that is because if you're not fully surrendered to the higher power, you are surrendered to your ego. There's no third option. There's not a third person that you're surrendered to. It's either God, Jesus, or your own ego. And your own ego leads you into very bad places, as you've all experienced. Again, life proof. When you choose to go and be a slave to your ego, it doesn't turn out well. And that's why all we have to do is look out at the world, look at society, look at wars and human trafficking and abuse and violence and famine and poverty. It is not rocket scientists that human beings have not figured anything out. And truly, because human beings are not sovereign. And the vast majority are never going to become sovereign because they're going to continue living in these boxes, these mind control boxes where they're not unpacking what's in the box. They're not looking at why they're not sovereign. So, when I posited this question of somebody who is sovereign, is like, do they eat animals? Do they follow a religion? And religions are all cults. Religions are deep, deep mind control. And if you look at your own life, if you follow a religion, and let's say you were Catholic and you just went to church every Sunday, that's a programmed behavior. You're doing something every Sunday, same time, same group of people, reciting the same prayers, pledging your soul to the Catholic Church. That's actually part of one of the prayers. You are drinking blood. You're participating in a satanic ritual, drinking blood, eating flesh that the priest magically transforms. And you're not thinking twice about it. Then you become an adult and you see rampant sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. And you witness the Vatican shutting down and bankrupting churches all over the world to avoid lawsuits for sexual abuse and predatory behavior. And people that know this still sit in the church Sunday after Sunday, drinking blood, eating flesh, committing their soul to a church, their soul committing to the Catholic Church. You see the same thing in the Jewish religion with circumcision. You see a ritual whereby little infant boys are having their genitals sliced into. And this is called a celebration. This is called something good and healthy. And people continue to do it. I remember the first time I was invited to a bris by some friends of mine in New York City, and I had no idea what it was. And we went to this gathering, and it was at their family's house, and it was like a big party. And, I see their infant, little baby boy, zero anesthesia, not that that would make it okay, but it would certainly make it more humane, strapped down to a board while the moil, which is what they're called, the rabbi who performs this, slices into this baby boy's penis, cuts off the foreskin, and is screaming bloody murder, screaming terror until he goes numb and stops crying. And along with this practice, and Google this, it's out there. This is very common, where this rabbi proceeds to orally, with his mouth, put his mouth on the genitals of this child to stop the bleeding, quote unquote. It was the most sick, vile thing I had ever witnessed in person. Granted, takes place every day in a hospital. And, across America, it's guaranteed it's happening right now to some poor baby boy. And of course, I researched circumcision extensively and researched all of the connection between circumcision and sexual violence and rape. There's a whole can of worms there that maybe we will unpack on a future episode. Circumcision is a massive form of abuse. And people continue participating in it. Why? Mind control, brainwashing, cult, the cult of religion, the cult of family tradition, the cult of the ancestors. You cannot be a sovereign being if you're not unpacking this. You can't. You can't call yourself a critical thinker if you are participating in any of these things that you did not fully choose. And, it's radical, but when I was an attorney, one of the other pro bono things that I was involved in addition to asylum for Tibetan monks and nuns, was the first case of female genital mutilation, which at the time, that was not considered grounds for asylum. It was, oh no, it's cultural, right? These things are always passed off as culturally acceptable. They're not human rights acceptable. They're not animal rights acceptable. They're acceptable to a group of people who has decided that they're going to normalize this. And that's why family cults are normalized. That's why religions are normalized. Because a group of people gets together and says, yes, it's okay to slice into the penis of an infant and cause him irreparable damage and harm where he will be reduced in his sexual function, not to mention the extreme trauma. And yes, it's okay to serve my 3-year-old this dead cow because we're accepting that as a society. I want to read a quote from Tara Burton, who is a PhD scholar in theology, and she has done a lot of writing on religions as cults. And she says, quote, "We define ourselves by participating in something, just as we define ourselves against those who don't participate in something. Our understanding of ourselves, whether we are cradle Catholics, newly joined up members of the Hare Krishna, or members of an internet fandom, as people whose actions have cosmic, if not metaphysical significance, gives us a symbolic framework in which to live our lives, even as it prescribes our options. Every time we repeat a ritual, from the Catholic Mass to a prayer circle on a farm compound to a CrossFit workout, it defines us, and we define the people around us." And what is so important about the spiritual path, your journey of your soul, which is a solo journey. The only thing that is true is that which you find within yourself. And the true spiritual path requires you to deprogram every single thing you have been brainwashed to believe since birth. The true spiritual path is an experiential path. And I can tell you, surrender to Jesus and he will guide you. If you do it, that it'll prove itself to you. It's not anything you have to believe. You have to do it. You have to try it. You have to put it into action in your life. I can tell you that if you do Reiki, it's dark. It will lead to dark stuff in your life. I have over 1,000 people who have had their Reiki symbols cleared just in the last couple of months. I've done many more than 1,000, but just in the last couple of months, and who report back to me that they have had radical life improvement after having the Reiki symbols removed. Things like their finances being better, their health being better, their relationships being better. They never connected the dots. I can tell you that. I can teach that because those are the life experience Jesus has shown me. And I'm here to share that with you, to teach that, to spread that throughout the world for whoever is ready to hear it. At the end of the day, you will experience it. You will have the experience. And often, one of the most common comments that I get, if you look through my highlights, there's a ton of comments like this, which will all be on my website, as I said, and I'll try to have them in categories because I get a lot of questions about specific things. But one of the most common comments I get from people says, you know what? When I hear you say this, it is the truth that was always inside of me. It's something I always felt, or something I always believed, or something I always knew, but everybody around me told me I was crazy. And to hear you say it, it resonates. That is everything, because it's activating the truth within yourself that you already know, but you've been brainwashed to repress. I hear that all the time. Liana, oh my God, the way you speak about Jesus, the way you speak about truth. It's the truth I always felt, but I was afraid. I thought I was crazy. Everybody around me had me convinced I was crazy. When something resonates with you to that core level, you know you've struck gold, because that's within you. That's within your own truth. And I have someone who messaged me about Reiki as a great example. And she said, this is in my highlights, by the way, called Reiki Danger. This is from 81 weeks ago. She said, my discernment has always kept tarot and Reiki at bay. I was soul attacked in grad school by a Reiki master. This experience nearly killed me. I had to keep Jesus in my mind's eye. It was all I could do to not be overtaken. That was my first experience with the darkness of Reiki. I agree, I don't need cards, never did, and I'm very careful when I let people work with me. They are not allowed to use tarot because of the lower frequency. The reason why this is so fascinating is because I was never taught this. I just knew. To hear you repeat it manifests the truth which has always been inside of me. Thank you for sharing. What you share reinforces what I already know to be true. And I had so many messages from people on this particular issue. Another person shared, Liana, I can't thank you enough. I have accessed so much joy over the last 2 days, even before I realized the clearing was complete. And that is a perfect description, because I too feel so much lighter and unburdened. Thank you from my heart. I am so relieved, because I could not figure out where this feeling of darkness was coming from. Sending so much love your way. So there's tons like that. And lots of people talking about feeling lighter, less dense, happier after I removed the Reiki symbols. Again, I can teach that. I can tell you that. I can state it matter-of-factly because I've experienced it. But you have to experience it. And that is the ultimate test of a true spiritual path, is that you have to deprogram every single thing you've been brainwashed to believe up to this point, surrender to divine will, and then start to experience and align your life choices with what you are feeling, and to validate yourself, to self-validate. Start to carefully observe what you're doing in your life on your path, because every time someone makes an ego choice and they choose the path of ego, they have a consequence, and that consequence is never a good one. And over time, people will just either continue to have bad experiences or eventually wake up and say, wait a minute, this isn't working. And they will choose divine experiences. They will choose to surrender to Jesus. It's one or the other. Like I said earlier, there is no third option. It's your ego controlling you, or surrendering to Jesus, where you're living your life aligned with what is true for you. And when you start to deprogram from the family cult, from the religious cult, from the cult of authoritarian parenting, from the cult of authoritarian education, from the cult of alcohol, the cult of toxic food, the cult of the entire fashion and fitness industry, the cult of social media, at the basis, it is all someone telling you that you are too stupid to see truth for yourself. So instead of opening the door for your sovereignty, opening the door for you to experience true sovereignty, they're shutting the door, and they're giving you a set of rules, a set of dogma, a set of authoritarian practices. You were never stupid. It's just that your brain began undergoing deep mind control from birth on. Unless you happen to be one of the very rare lucky ones who had unconditionally loving parents who fulfilled all 4 roles of the parent: nurturing, protecting, empowering, initiating. But you'll be searching far and wide before you come across a group of people who are truly sovereign, who have autonomy, who are critical thinkers deprogrammed from the mind control. The majority of people who would self-identify as critical thinking, like I said, they're participating in the cult of animal consumption, in the cult of religion, in the cult of family, in the cult of ancestors. They're not self-authorizing. You have zero authority over you in the universe. Even Jesus, God, is not trying to be your authority. That's why Jesus and God don't step in and force you to do something. You are given a wide berth from within. You can make any choices you want and then receive any and all the consequences from those choices. Life works like that. Life is energy. Everything is energy. Every single thing that shows up in your life, from depression, alcoholism, crappy relationships, children who don't want to connect with you, a need to numb out with alcohol, weed, television, and any other number of things that distract you from your truth. Ultimately, it comes down to life proof. Look at your life. Look at your level of peace, your level of true joy and true happiness in all the areas of your life, not just one. And recognize that you have no authority over you in the universe. You have yourself, your higher self. I want to share 2 quotes with you, which are very fascinating parallels. The first one comes from Will Tuttle, who is the author of The World Peace Diet. And he says, quote, "The suppression of awareness required by our universal practice of commodifying, enslaving, and killing animals for food generates the built-in mental disorder that drives us towards the destruction not only of ourselves, but of the other living creatures and systems of this earth. Because this practice of exploiting and brutalizing animals for food has come to be regarded as normal, natural, and unavoidable, it has become invisible." Second quote comes from Alice Miller, a psychologist who wrote the book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, The Search for the True Self. And she says, quote, "Child abuse is still sanctioned, indeed held in high regard in our society, as long as it is defined as child rearing. It is a tragic fact that parents beat their children in order to escape the emotions from how they were treated by their own parents." So here we have 2 quotes by 2 very different people at 2 very different times, and on 2 completely, seemingly different topics. One of the things I've always done, one of the things Jesus has always led me to understand and know, is the interconnectedness of everything, the interconnectedness of all issues that we experience as human beings. And without separating ourselves out and pretending that we're sovereign, pretending that we're critical thinkers, when we have whole areas of our lives that have gone completely unchecked, that we've never deprogrammed, that we've never examined, that we've never looked at and really answered the question, is what I am doing aligning with the truth that has been shown to me by the divine? So when you look at that first quote from Will Tuttle, where he says that the exploiting and brutalizing of animals for food has become so normal, so natural, and we believe it's somehow unavoidable, and because of that, it has become invisible. Of course it has. Because people can't even look at the brutalization videos. Nobody wants to look at that. People go, "Oh God, don't show me that. I don't want to see that." As they eat a hamburger or bacon. Just last week, there was a trial called the Smithfield trial, wherein 2 people were being charged with a felony and potentially could have spent 10 to 15 years in jail for breaking into Smithfield, which is one of the largest pork producers. And they broke in and removed 2 sick, severely underweight piglets. This was back in March of 2017. And they named the pigs Lily and Lizzie, and they brought them to get veterinary care, took them to a sanctuary for rescued farm animals. And later that year, the FBI got involved and chased the piglets across state lines and raided the sanctuary where they were living, bringing with them veterinarians who sliced off a piece of Lizzie's ear to perform a DNA test and confirm that she was the property of Smithfield Foods. The animals were not removed from the sanctuary and actually still live there to this day. But the baby pigs, who were barely a week old when the activists removed them, they were worth $42.20 each, or $84.40 total to Smithfield. And Smithfield is a wholly owned subsidiary of a Hong Kong-based pork company, WH Group, which reported $24 billion in revenue. And we're talking about $84 worth of pigs. And millions of dollars were spent on law enforcement going to track down the DNA of these 2 baby pigs. And when they went to trial, there was a huge attempt to suppress any of the truth. In fact, the judge ordered that no video from inside of the facility could be shown. Imagine, talk about brainwashing and mind control. Didn't want the jury to see, to look with critical mind and open eyes, to see the abuse. The great news is that the testimony of both of these guys, Wayne and Paul, was so phenomenal. And they were acquitted of all charges. So this was like a huge win and just a really great example going forward for the right to rescue and billions of animals who in the future will be helped by this. And, you know, it's so fascinating to me, especially in this topic of sovereignty and mind control, because when these activists arrived at the facility, they found rows and rows of pregnant pigs that were caged in crates that the company had swore they weren't using. And they found dead and rotting baby piglets inside the facility, as well as very visibly ill and injured ones like Lily and Lizzie. And they were just being brutalized and on the verge of death. And you know, Smithfield routinely throws sick or dead animals away. And had they remained in Smithfield's possession, they would have been worthless. And so, you know, given the nature of the trial, when the judge didn't allow the footage to be shown to the jury, they said their reasoning was it would, quote, cause an improper and emotional reaction within the jury. But at the end of the day, we are emotional beings. We have a conscience. We have a soul. We have a connection to God. We have a connection to the divine. And reestablishing your own connection to the divine is the point of everything you do in your life. And you can't really do that if you are programmed, if you're under mind control, if you're not looking to experience life. If you are just continuing on robotically with the programming of all of the cults that you've participated in for your whole life. One of the other things I wanted to share with you is someone who reached out to me on Instagram on this issue of family cults, which I have hundreds and hundreds of similar messages, but this person shared with me a story that really reiterates the mind control and the programming within the family cult, in particular, parents who don't see you for who you are. They're not seeing your truth. They are seeing a program. And I had shared something on my Instagram about a woman who this video had come across my feed, and she was saying, oh, when your rich Dubai husband is in a generous mood, and it proceeds to show all of these things that he purchased for her, lavish gifts and luxury items and whatnot. And I shared it with the caption, very sick programming, of course, because it's sick programming that someone should be, dependent on some, quote, rich Dubai husband to get all of these treats. It was like, oh, she was good and well behaved, so he bought her these things, right? Of course, unpack that. A lot of parents are teaching that. A lot of parents are lording their authority over children by promoting this good and bad authoritarian structure within the family. You're good if you do this. You're good if you get a good grade. You'll get treated better if you perform well at sports. If not, watch out. You'll get the wrath of mom and dad. Family cult. So someone responded to me when I posted that, and it was very sad, very tragic, very devastating. And she said, quote, "Before moving to the U.S., I dated one of the UAE Sultan's heirs when I was 20 years old. My mother was so brainwashed by this exact sick programming that she was super proud of me, and my dad gave his blessings too. 2 years in, Khalid took me to a private desert resort 3 hours drive from Dubai to propose. It was the time of Ramadan, so he could not openly do it because he was fasting, and he was, quote, such a good servant of Allah. His proposal went something like this. I love you very much and want to marry you, but my family insists that my first wife must be Arab. I am Russian and Persian, she shared with me. So please accept my proposal and then wait for me to quickly marry some Arab bitch. And then I'll marry you and make sure that you are still the head of all the wives. And then she says, his status required him to have 4. And you will boss them all around and live in luxury as the love of my life. I said, no, I can't do that. Sorry, I have to be the one and only. He became so angry and brutally raped me all night. I completely disassociated. Then he took me to Dubai and dropped me in a hotel. He told me that if I tell anyone, because sex is prohibited during Ramadan, he would take me across the border to Oman, where he can easily murder me without punishment. I was so scared, shocked, and traumatized I couldn't talk for weeks. I thought for sure I'll die in that desert, and no one will ever find me. It was 110 degrees Fahrenheit outside and only 70% of oxygen in the air. I never saw him again. My mother told me I was stupid and should have said yes. I thought I would add some reality to the video you shared. Thank you for calling that as it is. I still have many gaps in my memory and realize that I blacked out many times before in my childhood, but thank you and Jesus for the tools you have created for body and soul healing. I was able to remember and remove a lot of trauma out of my body. I remember my mother telling me that I should never tell any man about any feminine issues or he might not get turned on, or mention what happened to me, or he'll think I'm fucked up. It all goes back to childhood, of course. I had never even heard of unconditional love growing up. I always had to, quote, earn it. Thank you so much for accepting your spiritual path and showing us the way out of misery. Lots of love to you and yours. This story is one of many. I received a number of messages from women who have lived through similar situations, and as depraved and evil and satanic and sick as the abuse and the rape and the torture is the lack of protection of the mother. The lack of protection of the mother is a much bigger betrayal, because the parents are the people who are supposed to be there to protect you and nurture you, keep you safe. And when a mother says that she should have went with this man and that she was stupid for not going with a man who brutally raped her, you see the extent of family cult programming. And in so many families, this is the norm. It has become normalized to where it becomes invisible. Just like the quote from Will Tuttle on the animal abuse. They are so interconnected. But it takes a lot of deprogramming, releasing mind control, and actually looking at this and being willing to look at it without shame and guilt. Because one of the first things that happens when you begin to step out on the path of sovereignty and look at these issues, a huge wave of guilt and shame, because every person has participated in dark things. Family cult programming, it's almost a requirement for you to participate in dark things, whether it's eating animals or attending church services, being sexually abused, physically, emotionally abused. And looking at that to unpack it, to get to a place where you can be a sovereign being and think for yourself critically and experience life and then live your life based on your lived experiences. It's not an easy thing to do because you're so programmed to be told what to do. And, it's one of the constant conversations I have with my students in my community, on Instagram, in my private groups, is people start out on the healing path wanting a teacher to tell them what to do. And I actually did a word search in my Facebook group the other day, and I had said over 450 times since this group started. The group started in 2019. It's just one of my many groups, but one of my communities. I had said that many times, I can't tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You need to figure this out for yourself. Because in the beginning of a spiritual path, you come to it with already having been told what to do your whole life by authoritarian society, authoritarian school systems, authoritarian parents, authoritarian religions, heavy duty mind control, programming, brainwashing, cult verbiage that is in your mind. So you start to break away from that and you want something better for your life and something different, and you find a spiritual path, and then you're looking for that spiritual path to provide the answers, which the path will provide the answers. But you're looking for a person to provide the answers, and you're projecting your mother wound and your father wound onto whoever is a teacher of a path, which is normal, by the way. It happens all the time because that's what you're programmed to do. You're programmed to look outside of yourself for authority. The vast majority of people that I have worked with, that have been my students, that have purchased my programs, the vast majority of people message me. And in addition to saying that I'm saying things that resonate with what they always knew, they say, you're the first teacher who is a true teacher. You're the first teacher who is guiding me within my own self. Every other teacher, I had this teacher, that new age person, this guy, this person I found on Instagram, this book I read, this one was recommended by Oprah, Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins, whatever. They all tell me what to believe. You're the only person that doesn't do that. State facts, you state truth, you teach your experience. Absolutely. I will be doing that forever. That is what Jesus has me doing. That's what I'm doing. Honoring my path, being of service, asking every day, how can I serve? Use me, use my life, use my voice, use my platform, use everything I have, my gifts, my talent, my empowerment, my strength, my unconditional love that I not only received as a child, but that I give. Use me for that. Yes. Absolutely, wholeheartedly, I do that, and I'll continue doing that because I'm teaching what I have experienced. And then you get to try it. You get to try it on for size. You get to see how it works in your life. And I hear that all the time. Liana, you are the only teacher who is not telling me what to do. Over 450 times I've actually said those words. And that's only in one small Facebook group. I have a ton of other similar messages in Instagram DMs and my Signal chats and a billion screenshots that are all in the process of getting organized for my testimonial sections of my website. And so this person who shared that tragic, horrible story of a family cult abuse situation with her mom and dad, both telling her she should stay with this rapist, this sick, demonic man. She messaged me because I shared it in my stories. And these stories are always so helpful to thousands and thousands of other people who then also share their story and they feel validated. And she said to me, quote, "It feels so good to finally get validated. Thank you. It's like I can finally release the pain, let it go, and be free. When I was working through my mother wound program, I instantly realized that I will never heal when living with my parents and taking care of them. The first day I started mother wound, my mother literally fell in the kitchen and passed out. When she woke up, she said she felt like she had died. I thought to myself, interesting. But her subtle abuse continued. And the night you cleared her black magic cords off of me, my parents packed and left the next morning. They had no idea about this, by the way. I didn't mention it to them. I am fascinated with how the energy works. Thank you so much." And I was just smiling with joy when I got that message, not only because she feels validated and she recognizes that her story is worth telling and will help and empower so many other women, but that when she started to do the mother wound work, things shifted. Her mom fell. Her mom passed out, felt like she had died. And then I did a clearing for her. Most of these energy clearings I just do. People ask me and I just do them. I don't charge for them. It's not a program. It's just something I do out of love. And energetically cleared the cords off of her. And I didn't even know this till now. I mean, this had to have been months and months ago. And her parents packed and left the next morning and had no idea what had happened. And I have lots and lots of stories like that too. And again, I can tell you, this is how energy works. This is what happens when dark cords get cleared. This is what happens when you send people their dark energy back. This is what happens when you do the protection prayer. I can tell you that. Why? Because I not only experienced it in my own life personally, but now 10 years later, thousands and thousands of people saying, yeah, I'm experiencing this too. And it's incredible receiving messages like that, where people are having the experiences, they are putting in practice the teachings, and then their life is showing them through experience. And this woman also continued on with an additional message. It's just so fascinating, these experiences. And she said, yes, that night, I also caught 2 scorpions crawling out of my parents' room towards my daughter's room. I saw it as a sign that my mother was trying to attach to my daughter. It's like I woke up to it, putting my girl in danger, being so close to her. In the past, in Q&As, I asked you about my husband and also my daughter's night terrors a couple of times. And you always said, quote, "It's your mother. I recommend mother wound." I was really surprised. Now I totally get it. Another interesting fact is that my parents now moved in with their friends who are not on speaking terms with 2 out of their 3 daughters. And the one who still talks to them accused her dad of molestation in childhood, but then withdrew her police complaint and the case was dropped. Now they are, quote, good and babysit her daughter, but have not spoken with the other 2 girls for many years. There are no coincidences. We attract who we are. It is absolutely so incredible when people start to make the connections and people start to see the changes in their life when you become sovereign, when you unpack and deprogram yourself from the mind control. You surrender to Jesus. You start to ask, how can I serve? How can I be of service? Show me, reveal to me. You will be shown. You have to be in a place of surrender, though, because a lot of people say, well, I'm asking, but I'm not getting any clear signs. If you're not getting clear signs, if Jesus is not directly intervening in your life, it's because you're not fully surrendered. You're still trying to cling to ego. And you're just saying, oh, he's not talking to me. He's talking to everybody. He's communicating with you all the time. You're closed off to him. You're closed off to the divine because you still have the ego, and the ego blocks you. That's why channeling is so dark. People who channel, and they say they channel angels or they channel Jesus or they channel anybody. They are bringing that through their ego. Jesus can only come to you through your heart. And he is for every person, regardless of the religious cult programming, the family cult programming you had. He is for every person. I had another person today who shared something very similar, who about families and family members leaving the family, something very experiential, something that is just flat out life proof. You just have to take a step back and look at what is happening in your life. Actually think about it critically. Look at it. One of my students said, there are 5 kids in my family. My oldest brother left. My second oldest brother is a full-blown alcoholic who drinks morning to night. Then there's me, and then my sister, who is a mess. And my youngest brother, who is caught up in all of this, working for my demon father, an alcoholic brother in the family company. My youngest brother is a great guy and tried to leave the family business, but got sucked back in. He was not supported when he wanted to become a professional football player, which he absolutely could have done. He was an incredible athlete. But it wasn't what my dad wanted for him, so he couldn't pursue his dreams. My youngest brother is very trauma bonded and stuck in the cult. My mom and dad actually helped me get away from my psycho ex, but then they turned around and partnered up with him when I was shining a light on their abuse. What's so profound about these messages is that you have to look at your life. You have to look at what's happening in your life. You have to look at your experience. What are you experiencing? And if the most important thing you can take away from this episode 4 is about your own life experiences, that is something you will take with you forever. And recognize this: nobody leaves love. Nobody disconnects from a truly loving family. Nobody. We all gravitate towards love. We gravitate towards safety. We gravitate towards being seen. We gravitate towards being protected and nurtured and empowered. And for people who respect our choices and our decisions in life. And we move away from abuse. We move away from manipulation and control. We move away from families that were cults. And when you look at that message that I just read, that one child being an alcoholic, another leaving the family completely, another leaving the family completely, one being stuck in the family cult narrative because he couldn't pursue his dream of being a professional athlete, the other sister being a mess. That's 4 disasters out of 5 kids. My student, thankfully, choosing healing for herself, but going through hell in the process. You have to look at your life. You have to look at the experience. And you have to deprogram yourself in order to determine what is it that you believe. Who do you want to be in this life? What do you want to align with? How do you want to act? How do you want to serve? If you were taking your last breath in 5 minutes, what would you want your legacy to be? Do you want to be part of a legacy of family cults, of family cult abuse, of religious abuse, of authoritarian abuse? Or do you want to be sovereign? One of the messages that another student actually wrote about on a page, an Instagram page dedicated to these teachings, she said, I met Liana in 2014, 2015 when I began my search for better physical health. I was so determined to change my life. And so I started the journey with 66-day health mastery, candida cleanse, parasite cleanse, and throughout the healing of my body, my journey to healing my spiritual, mental health would be awakened with every word she spoke. I started listening to what she had to say, and for the first time in my life, it all made sense. Everything made sense. I knew deep down that what I had been taught my whole life was not it. There had to be more, and boy, was there more. More than I could ever have imagined. So my journey continued. Everything brought me closer to Jesus, not the Jesus religion taught us, but the real unconditionally loving Jesus that is real. And in learning about his unconditional love, I started learning about unconditional love of myself, my people, everyone, the animals, the plants, and my perception of everything shifted. I started letting go of toxic people in my life, letting go of toxic beliefs about work, about religion, about family cults, self-loathing, guilt, and shame. Healing is not a one and done deal. It is a process of peeling back the layers and discovering more and more that needs to be done. But that's okay, because as I peel back the layers, I am becoming who I was meant to be. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. So I want to share with you a few tips before we close out this 4th episode of Deep Throat Podcast. I'm going to give you some tips to recognize the ways in which people try to exert behavioral and psychological control over you, because in order to deprogram yourself, you have to really purge energetically the things that keep you hooked in. It's sort of like the heroin addict that's just hooked into a permanent supply of heroin. You have to pull the needle out. You have to deprogram yourself before you can start examining what it is that is actually true for you. Before you can open up fully to Jesus, you have to fully surrender to him. And that process of attaining sovereignty is inextricably intertwined with the surrender process. So there's a number of steps for you to take control of your life, but you have to kind of recognize how deep the behavioral and psychological controlling has been from your family, from religion, from society, from schools. So some of the key points which parenting psychologist Pamela Lee, L.I., has laid out in a nice format that I wanted to share with you. But she talks about psychological control, and she says psychological control refers to intruding into children's emotional and psychological development. Controlling parents are non-responsive to their children's emotional and psychological needs. They constrain, invalidate, and manipulate the kids' psychological experiences. They stifle the independent expression of emotions. And you see this in your adulthood when you are afraid to express your truth, when you are afraid to call out your parents for abuse, when you're afraid to speak out against sexual abuse or emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse. And you see those patterns in your relationships. They will be mirrored, because if you had parents like that, you for sure have had partners like that. And you were afraid of speaking out for fear of being gaslighted and invalidated and manipulated. Psychological control, huge red flag, something very necessary that you're going to have to look at in order to deprogram yourself. And the psychologist Pamela Lee continues by saying, these controlling parents manipulate children's feelings, thoughts, or ideas through the parent-child relationship using guilt, love withdrawal, showing disappointment, disapproval, and shaming. This is how they keep their kids emotionally dependent and enmeshed. Psychologically controlling parents are experienced by their children as being intrusive, possessive, directive, and controlling through guilt. I have lost count of how many students have told me the guilt and shaming they received in childhood, that their parents constantly showed disappointment and disapproval and would withdraw love and use guilt. And the vast majority of you don't even understand that that is abuse. That is child abuse. Someone posted something similar on Facebook. One of my students shared it, and hundreds of comments of people defending that you can tell your kids that you're so disappointed in them. It's child abuse. And people think it's normal. They think it's normalized, just like the animal abuse. That is how deep the mind control and the cult programming goes. To unpack this, to look deep into how controlled you actually are, it is very deep and it is very scary, because you come to a point, everybody comes to a point. It's sort of like the dark night of the soul, where everybody realizes, oh shit, I haven't made any actual sovereign, autonomous decisions my whole life. Of course, you're looking for somebody to tell you what to do, because you have no idea how to self-govern from a place of sovereignty. The good news is you can learn it. And I have lots of students who are learning it. And as I said in the beginning, are speaking out, and they are creating their own platforms, writing their own books, and doing their own podcasts. And it has been an absolute tidal wave of activation since the springtime, of people who are really stepping up to the plate and speaking out against their abusers and their family cults. But this is what people come to think of as normal. And people think, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just parenting. That's not parenting. That's abuse. It's authoritarian abuse. It is not unconditional love. And the role of the parent is to unconditionally love you, to be the model of the divine mother and the divine father. That's it. Not to be in disapproval or approval, not to be constantly relying on being proud of your kids. There's nothing to be proud of. Their accomplishments are their own, not yours to live vicariously through. But this is how psychologically damaging parents keep their children dependent and enmeshed with them. Pamela Lee continues on by saying, internal control. Psychological control is often exerted through subtle, nonverbal cues. These parents appeal primarily to forces and regulations that reside within the child, such as when parents activate feelings of shame and guilt. Because the control is more internal, covert, and non-obvious, most psychological control measures are internally controlling parenting practices. Externally controlling parenting is done in an open and overt fashion. Shouting, hitting, punishing, and rewarding are the common strategies used to coerce children with external contingencies. Psychological control is not always internally controlling. Some parents engage in personal attacks or erratic emotional behavior, such as alternating between caring for and attacking their children. Harsh parenting, helicopter parenting, and strict parenting are all externally controlling parenting types. All of these parenting styles are authoritarian parenting. Signs of controlling parents include: number one, demand blind obedience and conformity. That right there is the hallmark of the family cult, that you are expected to follow the family religion, blind obedience to what the parents say, and conform to the way the parents want you to live. That is psychological manipulation. It has to be deprogrammed. You have to release yourself of that to get your sovereignty. Number two, do not allow children to participate in or question the parents' decisions. I know for us, we've always had family meetings. We had a talking stick for years when the kids were younger that we would pass around when people would contribute. My kids would contribute and give their input that was valued. They were an equally valued member. They grew up empowered. They were allowed to participate in decision-making for the family. Number three, do not let their children make their own decisions. Number four, do not encourage choice or independence. Number five, dictate every aspect of the child's life. Number six, help the child without being asked. Use reasons, number seven, such as because I said so, to discipline. You know, sometimes when you are trying to explain something to your children, it could be hours of conversation. I remember that when I told my daughter she couldn't have Snapchat when she was very young, and all her friends had it. And, I attempted to explain to her the dangers, and there were things that she wasn't aware of, but she was, upset about that. She didn't understand. And she got angry. And I said to her, "You are perfectly rightful in your anger towards me. I get it. It's okay to be mad at me." And she was. And she stormed off really mad. And, later on that night, she came back out and she apologized. I said, "You don't have to apologize, honey. You have a right to be mad. You want this. You don't quite understand why you can't have it. And that's making you angry. And your anger towards me is valid. It's valid." She just wasn't at a place where she understood that. But my kids have always been able to express any emotions towards anyone, including their father and myself. And sometimes it requires extensive conversations. That's something I learned from my own dad. Never once said because I said so. Sometimes it would be hours of conversation that would go sometimes in circles. But that's what unconditional love does. It's one of the things my students say to me all the time. They're like, "My God, Liana, you have the patience of a saint. Like, I'm asking you the same thing 100 times. Of course, that's what I learned. That's how I learned. I learned through love. Love is patient. Never because I said so. Number 8, believe children should be seen but not heard. Number 9, manipulate and exploit the parent-child bond through such means as guilt or love withdrawal. I've heard from so many people who said their parents withdrew their love when they weren't doing what they wanted. Number 10, discipline through punishment and coercion. Number 11, using negative expressions and criticism such as disappointment and shame. 12, criticizing choices the child makes. 13, unrealistically high standards and expectations. The parent that insists on their kid getting straight A's or being a star athlete or following in the parent's footsteps. Example of my student who her brother wanted to be a professional football player and the parent pushed them in the direction of working for the family business. Abuse, authority, mind control, a whole life of dreams dead because of a parent's control. That is unbelievably tragic and sad. That young man's entire future, he was gifted as an athlete and could have pursued that dream. However it would have worked out isn't the point. That he would have had the possibility of pursuing a dream that is heartbreaking to me. That now he's sucked into the narrative and the drama and the family cult, the manipulation, the mind control, and not even believing that he was ever worthy of pursuing his dreams. Number 14, many rigid rules. Number 15, arbitrarily adding rules for more control. 16, lack of empathy for the child. 17, refuse to see things from the child's perspective. 18, believe they are always right. 19, always tell you what to do. And 20, do not respect your privacy. This will be the parent that is never giving you private time, especially as you get older. And she goes on to continue, parents who are very behaviorally controlling undermine their children's confidence in their abilities. Parental assistance during tasks and interrupting a child's problem solving communicate doubt regarding the child's competencies. As a result, these children suffer from low self-esteem. They are less self-regulated, higher in acting out, and lower in academic achievement. Most psychologists believe that psychological control is particularly damaging to a child. The insidiously manipulative tactics used by an internally controlling father or overbearing mother induce feelings of undue loyalty towards parents to comply with their authority. These parents place themselves at the top of a pyramid, that they are the authority of the family. These children's compliance is driven by a desire to avoid feeling guilty. So when they are rejected by their parents, they feel resentment. Children of controlling parents are prone to suffer low self-esteem, mental health issues, depression, and antisocial behavior. So in these family cults, in this mind control, it starts from very, very early on, and it continues throughout your life. And then it's compounded by religious cults and societal cults. And everything around you becomes mind control. You fall prey to it. Of course, you fall prey to drinking alcohol and getting drunk because, quote, that's what everybody's doing. Just like everybody's spanking their kid, or everybody is saying, because I said so, or everybody's eating animals. All of these things are intimately connected. But it's until you hear this, you hear someone speaking in this way in an attempt to empower you, for you to empower yourself. You don't stop and think. You're going on autopilot. That's why almost no one is truly sovereign. Even the people who would go to their graves saying they are, they're not. They're participating in things that they have never fully examined and held up against the mirror of their own light and their own truth. And when you get to adulthood, you are a product of all of this mind control, all of this programming, all of these cults. I want to read one more thing from Pamela Lee, and then we will wrap up episode 4. She says, common signs of gaslighting parents, which I chose to share this because in almost all family cults, you've been gaslighted. And a lot of people don't know what that is. That term is thrown around a lot. It's used incorrectly a lot. And it's so vital to understand and know. And there's a lot of research and writing and books and things on this topic. Common signs of gaslighting parents, they do so, quote, to maintain control, to maintain power, and a sense of being right in the parent-child relationship, end quote. So here's the signs that Pamela Lee gives. They deny their children's experiences. They twist facts to suit their own purposes. They never apologize. They think they know what's best for their children. I have seen people go to great lengths, even with adult children, who, abusive parents have a tendency to coagulate like a blood clot. And they want to come up with ways to get their kids back into the programming, especially if you've started to question your upbringing. They want to quickly get you back. And I've seen them. I've seen whole conversations out in public on the internet where they say they're thinking for themselves, we have to get them back. We know what's best. They're not listening to us. Yeah, these are grown adults, 30s, 40s, 50s. And they offer up tips on how to re-manipulate their kids back into the fold. It is so insane. And it's right out there in the open. Back to the list. They believe they know their children better than their children know themselves. They keep dismissing their children's feelings. They say things like, don't be silly, that never happened. That's not true. You must be confused again. There you go again, making things up. Anybody can do that. You're just making excuses. You're wrong, or you must have dreamed it. I never did that. It's all in your head. You remember wrong. I did not do what you said. No, you're not tired. Now go finish your homework. It's not a big deal. You're overreacting. That's okay. It's just a small cut. It doesn't hurt. What are you talking about? What I did was so good for you. You're cold and need to put on a coat. Well, you survived, didn't you? You had a great life. I told you not to do this. You could have finished it on time. Why'd you let it happen? My personal favorite. You've changed. Which, of course, is an indication of growth and expansion and stepping towards sovereignty. But for a manipulator, a controller, and a family cult leader, that's horrible that you're changing because they're losing their grip. They're getting enraged. No, you didn't see that because I never did it. Everybody knows I'm a good parent. The assignment isn't too hard. You're just being lazy. There's nothing wrong with me. You need to be more respectful. Keys don't lose themselves. You're being irresponsible. You should feel grateful for us. No, it's not. Your favorite color is blue. You're misunderstanding. That's not the case. That's not true. Your memory can't be trusted. If I had done that, it must have been done out of love. I absolutely didn't do that. You're just trying to make me look bad. See, I did all these things for you. I'm such a good parent. Everybody appreciated what I did, except you. Why is that? I'm right and everyone knows it, including your brothers and sisters. And Pamela Lee continues by saying the parents' gaslighting behaviors can lead to confusion, increased self-doubt, diminished self-esteem. They may develop depression. And in many cases, the child experiences mental health issues such as psychosis when their distorted reality continues to deteriorate. Gaslighters are usually narcissistic and authoritarian. They will not accept that your memories, aka their faults, are real. Arguing with them about your experience is pointless. After years of abuse, you are understandably looking for recognition and validation, but unfortunately, you will never get that from manipulative parents. A controlling and manipulative family system makes its members weaker. Members' autonomy, critical thinking, identity, and dignity are suppressed and distorted to serve the needs of the parents. Even if members of a dysfunctional, manipulative family become estranged, there is often a psychological dependence rather than a healthy integration with people outside the coercive environment of which they were part. So, in all of what I've shared with you, the messages that some of you have sent to me, the conversation around surrender and sovereignty and freedom and deprogramming and unpacking a lifetime of manipulation, I want to leave you with the most important thing that you can ever know, and that is that you are worthy of the best life you can imagine, and a life that's even better than that. You are worthy of being loved. You are already unconditionally loved by Jesus, by the divine. And you've likely had a lifetime of control, manipulation, abuse, and programming, which has led you to believe that you deserve none of the above. So when you first step out onto the spiritual path to find your sovereignty and your freedom, understand that it can be a treacherous path with a lot of pitfalls along the way and a lot of people that will try to pull you off the path, particularly people who have an interest in controlling you and continuing to control you. So be strong and carry on as you step into your most amazing life. And I want to thank everybody for being here on this podcast episode number 4 of Deep Throat. And by that, I mean throat chakra. You can follow me at Liana Shanti on Instagram and Twitter. I am also on YouTube now, Liana Shanti. My website is lianashanti.com, where you'll find my programs, my free offerings, and my blog. You can also subscribe to illuminationsforecast.com if you'd like to be part of my weekly message, which is everything from prayers and meditations, clearings, information on what is happening with the energy on the planet and the planets in the sky, with a dash of quantum physics, lots of humor, stories, and a frequent backyard rooster. Until next time, beautiful people, aloha.